start the show. This is the NRI special. We will help all the NRIs watching us, their relatives watching us, understand how are the different ways that the NRIs can invest in the Indian financial space, in the Indian equities and other avenues that are there for them in SIPs, etc. And how, what exactly will be the tax structure and what are the liable dues that they may have to pay or clear. But for now, let's start with Hemant Rustagi. He's joining us from Wiseinvest Advisors. Hi Hemant, thank you so much for joining us. Just want to start with a very basic question. What are the various avenues that NRIs have when it comes to investing in India?
Well, I think if we talk about the financial assets, there are quite a few options that are available to NRIs if they want to invest in India. There are good old fixed deposits. They can also invest in mutual funds. If they want, they can also invest directly into the stock market. Then there is a national pension scheme. Apart from that, there are quite other few options like convertible debentures, certificate of deposit. So there are quite a few options which are available. But I think the most prominent one which generally attract attention of NRIs and which are really beneficial for them are the first four that I mentioned. There are fixed deposits, investing in mutual funds, investing in the stock market, and also investing in NPS.
According to you, is the most prudent vehicle for investment if you're an NRI?
Well, I think, look, whether you're a resident or an NRI, basically you need to look at what your needs are, what is the requirement, what is your risk profile. So I think each of the investment options that I mentioned, there is a scope for you to have it in your portfolio. So clearly, if you are someone who's looking at a very conservative option, not looking at taking too much risk, then obviously there are fixed deposits. But if you want to really invest in India and want to benefit from what is happening in our stock market, in our debt market, and you're quite not well versed with how these investments have to be done, so I think the mutual funds are a great option because one, they are diversified by nature, the full-time professionals are managing your money, and in terms of even tax efficiency, I think they're the score. But if you are someone who want to invest for the long term and know how to select stock and which sector is doing well, which has the potential, then obviously you can look at stock market. But ideally, there is, like I said earlier, there is a scope to have each one of these in the portfolio in the right proportion, so that because let's not forget that when you're investing for the long term, the key is to get positive real rate of return, and that can only come from equity. And within equity, as I mentioned, either you invest directly or through mutual fund. But for someone who is not well versed, I think mutual funds are a great option.
Okay, all right. What about the documents, the paperwork, Aadhaar, etc.? Every NRI, before investing or after investing, what is the kind of paperwork they need to do, and what is the kind of ways that they can ensure they have applied this when it comes to equity or any other form of investment in India?
Look, when any NRI wants to invest in mutual funds, the NRI has to be KYC compliant. Now, there are few documents that are required. One is obviously the PAN, which is required. Then there are few documents required for identity proof, which can be a passport, it can be Aadhaar card, and also there is a proof of residence which is required, which has to be the current address, the offshore address, which can be a rental agreement or any other document, or even a bank account, for example, will have both the Indian address as well as the foreign address. So these are a few documents which are required, and then once you have these, there is an in-person verification has to be done, which can be done by the bank or it can be done by a KYD compliant distributor. So once it is done and the KYC process is over, NRIs are ready to invest in mutual funds. So these are few documents that if someone who is coming here now at this point in time should be having these documents with them.
Okay. What about the other way around? If an existing citizen of India or of the country is moving abroad, what are the things they need to check or verify and make sure they have in place before moving out?
See, clearly when someone resident is moving out of the country is going to acquire a status of NRI, there are few things that needs to be done. One, I think, would be to consolidate your bank account, because we have the habit of having number of bank accounts, and once you move out, it becomes very difficult to manage. In any case, technically, you cannot be holding a resident account. So you need to consolidate these accounts, make it into one account, and start the process or convert that into NRO account, because you can't be holding a resident account there. So do that. Also, some of the investment that you feel that is going to be difficult for you to kind of track when you go abroad, you need to really get rid of them. And also, if you are working somewhere and moving out and changing the job, then all the benefit that you have, employment benefits and all, is something that you need to look at. What are the changes that needs to be done? An important thing also is that if you have been investing in small saving schemes, as NRI you can't invest in most of them. So you need to make sure that you've taken care of that. You have to stop. If you're given some standing instruction, all that has to stop. So these are 3 or 4 steps you need to ensure that you have taken before you move out of the country.
Okay, all right, Hemant. Let's also address some of our viewer queries as well. First is from Ayush Atri. He's 29 years old. He's an NRI living in Israel and has started investing in India a year ago. He wants to retire early by, say, 40 years and wants to generate a monthly income from perhaps a minimum of 25,000 per month. He says he's invested in a couple of funds as well. Let me quickly read out the names. Axis Blue Chip 2.1 lakhs, Mirai Asset Emerging Blue Chip 1.8 lakh rupees there. Parag Parikh Long-Term Equity is where he's parked 2 lakh rupees. Reliance Equity Opportunities Fund 1.3 lakhs there. SBI Banking and Financial Services 1.8 lakhs. Axis Mid Cap Fund 1.2 lakhs. And SBI Small Cap Fund around 2 lakhs. He says that he's aware of the fact that there are so many funds which may not be good, but since he has had a large amount to invest, almost more than 24 lakhs in 3 years, so he wants to diversify it. In the long run, he wants to stay with Axis Blue Chip, Mirai Asset Emerging, and Parag Parikh Long-Term Equity. He's also invested in IPRU Asset Allocator and Franklin Ultra Short Bond as a safe bet as well. Okay, so lots of details he's already given us, but let me quickly tell you what the question is. He says, is my portfolio okay, or is it too diversified or risky? That's one. Do I need to exit SBI Banking and Financial and Reliance Equity Opportunities at the moment, or perhaps book profit and exit it? Third question. In the long run, he's thinking of having SBI Focused Equity Fund, which will replace SBI Banking and Financial, SBI Small Cap and Axis Mid Cap Fund. And finally, he wants to ask if that would be the right call according to you. Hemant, over to you. Tell us, what is your view?
Well, if you look at the current investment which are there in his portfolio, there are 2 parts to it. One is obviously, as he mentioned, there is a short-term part of the portfolio, which there are 2 funds, which I think is quite alright, because that is something that will really work well for him. The rest, if you really see, I think he has 7 funds. Maybe for his current investment, one can say definitely that there are 1 or 2 funds which he can actually kind of, realign the portfolio and reduce the number of funds. But the thing is, like he mentioned, he also has large sum of money to be invested over a period of time. So I think one, he has chosen the right asset class to invest in equity. Second, if I see in terms of funds individually, the fund selection is quite good. Yes, with the number, maybe there is a scope that you can reduce 1 or 2, but then considering that he has more money to invest over a period of time, maybe he can continue with that. What I really see here is, like I said, the fund selection is good, but there has to be a proper balance between allocation to 3 different segments of the market: large cap, mid cap and small cap. And what I see here in this portfolio is there is a bias towards small, mid cap, and there is also a thematic fund, which is something maybe he needs to realign a bit. Otherwise, I think number of fund is fine, but considering the money, more money has to be invested, I think he should be fine. 1 or 2 fund if he wants, like he mentioned about Reliance Equity Opportunity, which has actually now become Nippon Multi-Cap, is something that he can definitely look at not continuing. My recommendation would be that he should continue with the banking fund, because all said and done, if you believe that Indian economy is going to do better, maybe after a couple of quarters, the banking fund should do very well. Even though it's a thematic fund, the performance can be erratic, but my advice to him would be that he can maybe continue with that. So maybe 1 fund he can look at kind of exiting. The rest of the funds are fine, because he mentioned about 3 funds earlier which he wants to continue. Remember, when you're investing for the long term, there has to be decent exposure to small and mid cap, because these 2 segments if you have it in the right proportion, have the potential to really enhance your overall portfolio return. So I would say like maybe make one change. He's all right in terms of short term. The rest of the funds are fine. The key factor is he's investing in equity. If he can invest on a regular basis, that'll be great. And he should not really worry too much about how the markets are functioning in the short term, because in the long run, his portfolio should be able to yield very good results.
Okay. All right. Let's move right on to query number 2 as well. This is from, one second, I'll just, okay, it's from Anirush Mukherjee. He says his wife and him both are NRIs with a saving of 65 lakh rupees. They want to get maximum returns out of the same. I'm sure, I'm not really surprised they want to, but he wants to know how should they save up? What are the best ways to park their money? And perhaps I feel, given that they've not divulged too many details, they want to, they're looking at a less riskier vehicle or avenue to park their monies, but they want as much returns as possible. Hemant, I'll leave the floor to you. What do you suggest?
Well, you rightly said, even I'm not surprised that every investor who want to invest want to get the best return. But I think it's very important to design a portfolio which reflects what you intend to do with your money. For example, if I want the best return, I should be willing to take some amount of risk. I need to have a definite time horizon. Ultimately, the key for the success of your portfolio is what is the asset allocation in your portfolio. That's a key because it decides what kind of return can you expect and what kind of risk are you taking from your investment. In this case, they've said, I want the best return. They haven't really mentioned about their time horizon, assuming that they want to invest for the long term and the objective is to create wealth with the corpus that they have and want this money to grow at a healthy rate. Surely, multi-cap, well-diversified multi-cap funds will be a good bet for them. But my advice to them would be to understand what are the attendant risk of building this kind of portfolio. Don't forget, when you're investing in equity, there are going to be bouts of volatility from time to time, especially in the short term to medium term. Yes, of course, in the long run, you will get better return than other asset classes, but you need to be mentally prepared and you should have the capability to go through that volatile period. Without looking at these two factors, it will be very risky to straight away go into equity funds. So once you decide your time horizon, you know how much is this proportion of your overall investment will help you decide what kind of asset allocation should be there. Once you have done that, then look at the fund. So if your decision is to invest in equity, look at well-diversified multi-cap funds to begin with. And like I mentioned earlier, if the intent is to invest for a longer term, maybe 1 or 2 mid and small cap funds. So that should be the ideal combination, but it's very important to get your expectations right and be very clear as to what is your going to be time horizon when you're making such a large investment.
All right, Hemant, thank you so much for joining us on the show, helping our viewers out with their queries as well. But before we step into a break, here's Radhika update.